It's extraordinarily well considered. It's been our core defensive network. It's been the anchor of Britain's defence commitment, Britain's defence budget, ever since NATO came into being, and Britain was one of the founder members in 1949. And around the world, and particularly in the Western Defensive Alliance, Britain has always been looked to as one of the key leaders. And of course, we've played that role even today in Ukraine. So it's incredibly important that we remain part of it. We are, if you like, considered one of the wise old men at the top table of NATO. Would send shockwaves not just around Europe, but to Canada, to the United States, and right around the world, because that would be taken as Britain absolving itself of any kind of leadership in the modern world. And that would play against us in so many other spheres.
Well, I suppose to some extent the Green Party may be arguing that Britain shouldn't be a leader when it comes to military or defence matters. To some extent, the European Union may well be centralising their defence ambitions. There was discussion in the French presidential election as to whether or not NATO was actually that relevant anymore. And, of course, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, was famously quite critical of NATO, or at least of European funding of it. So, to some extent, there has been a bit of a move away from NATO, at least potentially up until several months ago. But maybe the temperature has now changed. Maybe the war in Ukraine has made us all think that actually NATO is still an incredibly relevant part of our defence structure. Could it be that the Greens are simply just a few months out of date?
Well, several points there. The first is that, yes, there's renewed interest in NATO. If you take NATO away, what else is there? I mean, there is no other international body in the world that focuses on defence and security like NATO. So you take it away and you pull the thread of quite an intricate structure that has actually kept the peace since 1949. Now, Donald Trump's objections to NATO were based on the fact that America was paying the lion's share of the NATO budget, and the NATO partners, particularly Germany, weren't stepping up to the minimum 2% that they always had agreed that they would pay. So that was that. Emmanuel Macron's playing with the idea of NATO in a public debate in France was all connected with his election. And of course, his main opponent, Marine Le Pen, wanted to leave NATO. So in the course of his campaign, he wanted to seem to be ambiguous so he could get some of Le Pen's votes. And of course, now he's president, he's been re-elected, although there's other elections further down the line. He's already issued a notice to say that France will do more to send military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. So this puts the Green Party right out there on their own. They're not relevant to anyone else's discussions from any other nation. And what they've done is they've said, well, what we want is peace. Well, fine, everybody wants that, but they're putting the cart before the horse, because their interpretation of NATO is that it's a warlike, aggressive organisation that is disturbing the peace. And we would say, or I would say, it's exactly the opposite. It's the one organisation we have in the world that has kept the peace. And were it not around, then the situation in Ukraine would be a lot worse, because there would be fewer nations feeding aid and military aid to Ukraine, and that would be piecemeal. It wouldn't be coordinated. Ukraine would have been overrun by now, and that would have been the fault of the rest of the Western world.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.